So this is episode 28, and we are looking at Java class methods. Alright, so in order to get started with this episode, we need to create a vehicle class. Then we will be demonstrating a couple of class methods within the vehicle class, as it were. So let's actually start by creating a public static. Then maybe let's call this one actually the return type is going to be void. Before you can think of a name, then maybe let's call this one maximum speed. Then let's call this one transmission. Then let's give a string parameter called tx, short for transmission. Then we simply want to sys out the vehicle. The vehicle is, then we specify the transmission, whether it's manual or automatic. So whatever the variable we pass in there, we are going to put it inside of tx there. Alright, so let's actually go ahead and demonstrate the concept of actually, maybe before we do that, let's actually create two more methods. Let's create a static, then void, then let's call this one vehicle name. Let's maybe call it print vehicle name. Then let's also give it a string parameter called name, which is going to hold the name of the vehicle when we finally call the method. Then you also simply want to sys out the vehicle. Actually, let's just print the name there. Then let's create a final method called let's make this one public void. Then let's call this one max speed. Then it takes an integer argument called max. Then let's actually sys out and say top speed is, then we concatenate with whatever the value of max given during at runtime. So what we did here is that we created three types, or the three different types of methods that you'll be seeing, or that you'll be developing or writing within your programs as you progress with your Java journey. But what I want to demonstrate in this example is that the method header for each you see that is different, right? This one is public, static, and void, the return type, but of course the return type could be anything really. Then this one is simply static, and this one is public. So I want to demonstrate the keyword static and leaving out the keyword static. So what the static keyword does to a method, and what it does if you omit the keyword static. So down here, let's actually create a main method. Then within the main method, what we want to do is we want to first demonstrate the concept of a static method, right? So let's actually call the transmission method. Then we know that it takes a string, so let's actually pass a string. Maybe let's say manual for a manual transmission car. Then let's open the terminal and actually compile that particular class. So Java C, then Java vehicle. So you see that it runs, right, as you'd expect. It's running the code that is within the transmission method, as it were. So it's saying that the vehicle is manual for the transmission, right? So that's one thing with the static method. A static method basically means that you can call that particular method without instantiating an object from that particular class. So you realize that we didn't create a vehicle object, as it were, but we were actually able to just call the transmission method, and that happened without any issue being escalated by the Java virtual machine or by the Java compiler. So we can actually do the same again with this one, with the static method on line 8 here. So what we can do is we want to demonstrate that this static method, it belongs, you don't need to create an object so for you to use it. So maybe let's print vehicle name, then maybe let's make it a Jeep, then compile and run. So you see that the vehicle is manual, then we get the word Jeep there printed down there in the console. So what I should highlight between these two methods is that this one with the public keyword or the public access specifier, you can call this particular method outside of this vehicle class, right? Then this one on line 8, the print vehicle name method, since it is not public, you cannot call it outside of the vehicle class, right? So that's the only difference between these two methods, but both of them, they are static in nature. So it means that this static method right here, you can actually call it, but you can only call it within the vehicle class right here, and you can also call it without creating an object. So let's actually try and call the maximum speed without creating an object. So I'm just going to type max speed, then maybe let's say 180, right? And before you even think of compiling the code, you see that the IDE is telling us that there's a problem. And if we hover over this squiggly red line, you realize that it's saying that it cannot make a static reference to the non-static method maximum speed from the type vehicle. So what this error simply means in plain English is that we are trying to call a non-static method, right? So notice we do not have the static method going on there. So if we wanted to make use of this particular method right here, we would need to actually create a vehicle object first, then we can then access that particular method. So that's the whole idea of a class, or rather the whole idea of class methods, as it were. So you have two types of class methods. You have static methods and you have non-static methods. So static methods, you can call them without instantiating an object, like we saw in the transmission and print vehicle methods. But now we are trying to call the maximum speed method right here, and it's telling us that we cannot do that because it is a non-static method, right? So how do we fix that? So we know that we need to so actually there's two ways you can fix this. You can make it static, right? But sometimes you do not want to make all your methods static. So in order to fix that, we actually have to create an object of type vehicle. So let's create a vehicle called car. Then we call the constructor. Now that we have an object, we can then come here and then say car dot, then we want to call the maximum speed method. So let's have max speed, then we pass 180 there. So this time around, you notice that we are not getting a red squiggly line, meaning to say that we do not have an error. So this simply means that now that we have an object, we can then access this non-static method called max speed. And as you'd expect, we can actually compile, then run this, and we would get the output. The top speed is 180. So yeah, that's a wrap for class methods. So the key takeaway is that you can create a method with the static keyword, right? So this is going to simply mean that you can actually call that particular method without creating a class. Then if you are creating a static method, right, you can make it public so that you can access it outside of this particular class, or you can just leave the public keyword. So this by default is actually going to make it so that it's only visible within this particular class, right? So if you are going to need to call this method from outside this class, you might as well make it public. But otherwise, if it's just going to be used within that particular class, you can just make it static without creating an object, of course. But if you want to make it so that whenever a person, if you want to make it so that a person actually has to create a method before making use of, create a class, create an object rather, before using that particular method, you have to make it so that you leave the static keyword. So in that case, we would say this is a non-static method, and for a non-static method, you actually have to instantiate an object like we did in this case. We instantiated an object called car, and that is the only time we were able to access the maximum speed method, as it were. So yeah, I think that's a wrap for class methods. I'll see you in the next one.